In Laboratory Reddit, today's story is...
My mother-in-law abandoned my son in the park during an allergic reaction, and now she is in prison for 6 years. The nightmare began on my wedding day. I am 34 years old, and as a woman I should feel completely happy about my wedding, but my emotions are mixed. Yesterday was a wonderful day in many ways, marrying Henry, 36, who has always been by my side. However, it is difficult to forget everything that has happened recently. I have a son named Ben, 7, from my previous marriage. To give some context, Ben is the son of my first marriage to Finn, my late husband. Finn died unexpectedly when Ben was just 2 years old, leaving me alone to raise him. Ben and I have always been an inseparable team. From the moment he was born, Ben became the center of my world. Losing Finn was incredibly painful, and it is impossible to fully describe that loss. Ben was too young to understand why his dad didn't come home anymore. It broke my heart every time he asked about Finn or pointed to his picture with that confused look. But no matter how hard it was, Ben became my reason to keep going. Being a single mom was a challenge. I had to balance a full-time job, pay the bills, and handle the emotional burden of trying to be everything for Ben. I barely had time for myself, and honestly, I didn't even consider the possibility of dating. My priority was to make sure Ben felt protected and loved. That's why meeting Henry was such a surprise. I wasn't looking for a relationship when we met by chance one afternoon in the park. I had taken Ben to play, and Henry was there with his niece Violet, 7. Ben and Violet connected immediately. Henry and I ended up sitting on a nearby bench, chatting while we watched the children. There was something about him, about his calm and steady presence, that made me feel instantly comfortable. He listened to me as I talked about Ben and Finn, not with pity, but with genuine interest. After that day, Henry and I continued to meet up. It turned out that he lived nearby, and we soon began to meet intentionally to organize play dates with the children. What impressed me most about Henry was the naturalness with which he connected with Ben. He never treated him as someone else's son. Instead, he saw him as a bright and curious child who simply needed someone to be there for him. As our relationship grew, Henry became more than just my partner. He became a father figure to Ben. He attended school events, helped with bedtime stories, and learned to use an EpiPen for Ben's peanut allergy without being asked. I didn't have to do any of that, but I wanted to. For the first time since Finn died, I felt like I could breathe again. Henry wasn't just there for me. He was there for us, and that made all the difference. The whole problem revolves around my mother-in-law, Ida, 60. She has always been a stern and stubborn woman who places a lot of importance on appearances and maintaining control. Her advice often sounded like criticism, and she has always had extremely high expectations of everyone around her. When Henry introduced me to Ida for the first time, she made her feelings clear to me, albeit in a subtle way. I was not the ideal wife he had imagined for his son. As a widow with a young son, Ben, I did not fit his image of someone who could commit completely to Henry without any burden. She was polite but distant, and her cold attitude showed that she did not consider Ben and me to be part of her family. Ida never made any effort to get to know Ben or to establish any kind of relationship with him. While Henry was becoming a father figure, Ida seemed to think that he was taking on too much responsibility. She disguised her comments as concern, but it was clear that she was judging him. At family events, Ida either completely ignored Ben or made comments about how children need their real parents. On one occasion, she said in a crowded room that Henry should not feel obliged to share his resources with another man's son. She was barely trying to hide her displeasure. The problem with Ida wasn't just with me. It was that Henry's life wasn't aligning with her vision for him. She wanted to control how everything played out, and our family didn't fit her concept of perfection. Over time, her actions only created a rift between us, making her disapproval difficult to ignore. Avery, 39, my sister-in-law, has always been a source of kindness and support in my life. From the moment I met her, she welcomed me with open arms, treating Ben and me as family without a second thought. While other relatives were distant or critical, Avery went out of her way to make us feel included. She has been a great friend, whether offering advice, lending a listening ear, or stepping in to defend us when necessary. She was always available. Her daughter Violet shares her mother's charm and is one of Ben's best friends. Avery constantly reminds me that I shouldn't pay attention to her mother and her comments. A week before the wedding, Ida suddenly got in touch with me. She was being kind, almost eerily sweet. She said she wanted to build a better relationship with Ben before the wedding and invited him to spend the day with her and Violet. She promised to take them out for lunch, to see a movie, and to get ice cream. A fun day out for the kids. I was perplexed. This was so out of character for Ida that it seemed suspicious. Ever the optimist, Henry thought it was a sign that she was finally giving in. He encouraged me to give her a chance, to allow her to prove that she could be a positive influence in Ben's life. Against my better instincts, I agreed. Ben was thrilled. He had always wished that Ida would love him. The idea of a day with her and Violet excited him. That morning I prepared his EpiPen. He has a severe peanut allergy, and I went over his allergy protocol again, although Ida already knew it. I also reminded him to call me if any problems arose. During the day, I sent Ida messages on a couple of occasions to see how things were going. Her replies were short. Everything is fine, or they're having fun. She usually replies to messages with really long paragraphs. So when I saw how short her messages were, I got worried. But I tried to convince myself that maybe she was just busy concentrating on the children. That night I received a call from Violet. Her voice was trembling, and she was crying so hard that I could barely understand her. What I did manage to make out sent a chill down my spine. She said that Ben hadn't woken up, so Ida had left him behind. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. What did she mean? Left behind? I asked her where they were. Between sobs, Violet gave me the address of a park about 20 minutes away. Henry and I set off as fast as we could. When we arrived, I saw Ben sitting on a bench with a park security guard. He was pale. His mouth was swollen, and he looked like he had been crying. The security guard explained that he had found Ben alone, crying and visibly ill, and had been trying to keep him calm. We rushed Ben to the hospital, where the doctors confirmed that he had had an allergic reaction. They said he was lucky that he hadn't gone into anaphylaxis, but his symptoms were severe enough to require immediate treatment. It turns out that Ida had taken the children to a bakery and let Ben eat a cookie that probably contained traces of peanuts. Even though she knew about his allergy, she didn't bother to check or make sure he was safe. When he started to show symptoms, difficulty breathing and dizziness, she panicked. Instead of calling for help, she abandoned him. She abandoned my son. She told Violet to keep quiet about what had happened and left Ben behind as if he meant nothing. The hospital kept Ben in overnight for observation. I barely slept and stayed by his side all night. How could someone be so cruel, so callous? Henry was furious. As soon as Ben was stable, he called his mother, demanding an explanation. Ida didn't pick up, but sent a text with a flimsy excuse. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. No apologies, no acknowledgement of the danger she put Ben in. Henry decided to report her to the police. He said it wasn't just about. It was about holding her accountable and making sure she couldn't hurt anyone else. I agreed. What if the security guard hadn't found Ben? What if we'd arrived too late? Ida was arrested. She called Henry from prison, begging him to post her bail, but he refused. When Henry decided not to post Ida's bail, she turned to Avery for help, but Avery also refused her. Avery was furious, not only because of what Ida did to Ben, but also because she involved Violet by asking her to lie. As a mother, Avery couldn't ignore the fact that Ida put Violet in such a difficult situation. This situation caused Avery to set a firm limit with her mother. In the past, she had tried to remain calm, but this time Ida's behavior went too far. The wedding went off without a hitch, but it had a bittersweet atmosphere. Henry and I did our best to focus on each other and our family, but the weight of recent events never left our minds. Now, Ida was in jail, facing charges for what she did. I feel no guilt. Since Henry and I started a relationship, I have tried to respect Ida no matter what she did, but in the end she went too far, and there is no going back. I can't imagine ever forgiving her for what she did to my son. So, am I the bad guy for letting my mother-in-law rot in jail instead of bailing her out? Update 1. Hi, I'm back with an update. It's been about a month since our wedding. We had the most amazing honeymoon ever. Now about Ida. Her sister posted her bail a week or two ago, and as expected, she got in touch with us. I wasn't surprised to hear from her. She called Henry, I think 3 days ago. Henry saw the call, but didn't answer. He knew that if he did, it would only lead to his mother trying to make him feel guilty and saying terrible things about me and Ben. So Ida left multiple messages. In her initial messages, she talked about how angry she was, how bad she felt about herself. She accused Henry and Avery of being ungrateful, acting as if all the things she had done for them over the years should give her a free pass for the damage she had caused. For Ida, nothing was ever enough. She constantly made Henry feel like he owed her everything, even though she had manipulated him emotionally all his life. She didn't see herself as a person who made mistakes. She saw herself as someone who was entitled to others' devotion because of all she had sacrificed. The fact that Henry and Avery finally began to distance themselves from her did not sit well with her, and she hated him for it. As her anger grew, she tried a different tactic: guilt. She told Henry that he owed her his life, as if she had made all these sacrifices for him, and now it was his turn to give something back. She presented herself as a martyr, someone who had given up her life for him. The particular comment about being a slave wife was a reminder of how she saw her relationship with her late husband, as if she had been nothing more than a servant to him and to everyone around him. This was typical of Ida. She never acknowledged how much damage she had caused by imposing unrealistic expectations on those she supposedly loved. Everything she did for Henry was always conditional. She did it because she expected something in return. The more she talked, the more desperate she became. She couldn't accept that Henry had moved on, that he had chosen me over his vision of how his life should be. She said in her messages that Henry was blinded by love, suggesting that his feelings for me were messing with his head. She called me a witch, implying that I had some kind of control over him and had ruined his way of thinking. It didn't seem to matter to him that Henry loved me for who I really am, or that we had created a life together. To Ida, I wasn't a loving wife. I was a villain who had manipulated him into cutting ties with his family. Her constant need to be the center of Henry's world made it impossible for her to understand that he had found happiness without her approval. What really shocked me was when he compared me to his ex-girlfriend. She had always been his favorite, and now he was openly saying that he should have married her instead. He claimed that his ex was exactly like her, apparently. She was a sweet person and would have been a perfect wife for him. But what she really meant was that Henry's ex was controlling and demanding, just as Ida had always been with Henry. She saw that woman as someone who could handle Henry, someone who would keep him in line in the same way she had tried to do for years. She couldn't accept that Henry had chosen someone else, someone who wasn't like her and who didn't need to control him to feel important. As if that wasn't bad enough, the messages took a darker turn. Ida started calling me terrible names, hurling every insult she could think of. The more I listened, the angrier I got. She had been toxic for years, but hearing her speak so cruelly about me was one thing. Hearing her talk about Ben was something completely different. She called my innocent 7-year-old son hurtful names, calling him useless and someone else's discarded baggage. I felt terrible listening to her talk about him like that. Ida didn't hold back. Her messages took an even darker turn. At the end of one particularly awful one, she actually said she hoped something bad had happened to Ben that day. She put it in the most appalling way. I couldn't believe her audacity. It gave me the shivers. Hearing a person wish harm on a child was just disturbing. There was no excuse for such bitterness, and it made it clear how lost Ida really was. It wasn't just about control, or even Henry anymore. It was about her desire to hurt those who didn't conform to her twisted version of reality. In that moment, I realized that I couldn't let Ida anywhere near our family ever again. Those voicemails weren't just her letting off steam. They showed who she really was. She had always been manipulative and toxic, but now she felt like a real threat to us. Henry had already said he was done with her, but hearing her say such horrible things made it clear that we needed to cut all ties. Anyone who could talk that way about a child, especially a family member, didn't belong in our lives. So Henry sent her a message asking her to stay away from our family and blocked her. We think he did the right thing. I was still willing to believe that Ida didn't know that what she bought for Ben had traces of peanut, but now I'm convinced that she did it on purpose. And even if she didn't know, it doesn't matter. She left my son alone when he was suffering. She ran away. She deserves whatever happens to her and worse. I'm just upset that we didn't take more action. and I genuinely believe we should do something. Update 2. Hi, it's been a week since my last update. Things have only gotten worse. Avery called us very late the night before yesterday. She said that after Ida was released from jail, she immediately started flooding her with text messages, dozens in fact. At first, Avery hadn't replied to any of them. She knew that replying to Ida would only lead to more drama, but then she went through the messages. Ida had written pages and pages of accusations. She accused Avery of being ungrateful, something we had all heard before. For Ida, it was as if no matter how much Avery or anyone else had done for her, it was never enough. She felt entitled to support, and when she didn't get it, she turned it on everyone around her. Ida had this strange ability to make others feel like they owed her something. Especially after all the damage she had done, she played the victim rather than taking responsibility for what she had done, expecting sympathy while completely ignoring the damage she had caused. Ida also wrote about how much she had sacrificed for everyone over the years, although she never gave any specific details. Avery, who had been on the receiving end of this kind of behavior for years, no longer accepted it. She knew Ida too well. Then she wrote about me, obviously. Ida had always pointed to me as the culprit in her strained relationship with Henry, but this time she took it to another level. She blamed me for practically everything. According to her, I wasn't just Henry's wife. I was the one controlling him. In Ida's twisted mind, Henry had somehow become a puppet with me pulling all the strings. She said he was blinded by love and that I had somehow taken over his life. Basically, she just copied and pasted her message from Henry to Avery. As if that wasn't bad enough, she directed her anger at the children once again. I expected her to be cruel to Ben, but when she started talking about Violet, it came as a complete surprise. Violet, after all, was only 7 years old. She was Avery's daughter, someone who had no part in the adult drama that was unfolding, but to Ida, Violet was as much of a problem as anyone else. Ida went on to say that Violet should have kept her mouth shut when she called me to tell me what Ida had done to Ben. She blamed Violet for exposing her and said she should never have gotten involved in matters that did not concern her. This was not only unfair, it was absolutely disgusting. Violet is just a child, and all she wanted was to keep her brother safe by being honest. What really shocked us was when Ida mentioned that Violet and Ben would have to pay for their actions. The meaning behind her words was vague, but the threat was clear. Avery and Henry were stunned. What did she mean by pay? Did she mean emotionally? Or was this a direct threat to their safety? Nobody knew, but it was worrying. It was clear that we couldn't let this go on any longer. Avery and Henry were in shock, and we all knew that Ida was capable of anything. We couldn't allow her to continue manipulating and threatening our families. Avery's husband Victor, 40, who is a lawyer, immediately offered to help. He knew exactly what steps to take to ensure that we could protect the children and the rest of us from any further harm. Legal action was the only way forward. We knew it wasn't going to be easy, but at this point it was the only option. We had tried to talk things through with Ida before, thinking she might come around, but it was obvious she was too far gone. She had been given so many chances, and each time she disappointed us. We simply couldn't afford to give her any more opportunities to mess with, hurt, or intimidate the people we care about. So with Victor's help, we started making plans to take legal action. It wasn't about revenge, it was about protection. It wasn't about getting back at anyone, it was about keeping our children safe. We had to make sure that Ida couldn't threaten or harm them. The choice was a difficult one, but it was obvious that we had no other option. We couldn't allow Ida to continue without consequences. It was necessary to hold her accountable for what she did, and seeking legal action was the only way to prevent her from inflicting more harm. We had been tolerant for too long, and now we needed to take action. We would not let her hurt anyone else, particularly the children. The line had been crossed, and it was time for her to face the consequences of her behavior. Update 3. Hi everyone, here's another update on the situation with Ida. I know many of you have been following this closely, and I appreciate all the support. The last few weeks have been hectic, but we are making progress. I want to update everyone on our current situation. After everything Ida has done, the threats, the horrible things she has said about our family, especially the children, we have made the decision to take legal action. We have officially filed a case against her and feel we have reached the point where we have no other choice. Ida's behavior has gone on for too long, and we cannot just let her get away with it anymore. Avery's husband Victor has been an incredible help through all of this. Victor is going to represent us in this case. I can't express how much it means to have someone like him on our side. We have already sent Ida a legal notice. This is a formal step in the process that officially informs her of the case we have filed against her. It also makes it clear that we are serious about what is happening and that there will be consequences for her actions. It's a way of letting her know that she can't keep manipulating and threatening us without repercussions. One thing we hope for is to avoid going to court if we can. The lawyers, Victor and Ida's lawyer, have chosen to try and negotiate a solution without going to court. However, this won't be simple. Everyone knows that Ida can be unpredictable and stubborn, which makes it difficult to predict her response to the legal notice. We're still not sure exactly what Ida meant when she said that both Ben and Violet would pay for exposing her. But we're not taking any chances. We're taking all possible measures to protect our families. In the meantime, we are doing everything we can to stay strong and focused. The next few weeks will be important, and there is still a lot of uncertainty about what will happen next. We want to make sure that Ida can never cause harm to anyone in our family again. I will continue to update everyone as things progress. Update 4. Hi everyone. It's been a long time since my last update. I know many of you have been asking how the case is going, and I'm finally in a position to share what has been happening. The case has been ongoing for quite some time, so I wasn't allowed to post anything about it during that period. But now that it's all over, I can finally tell you what's been going on. Things started with us filing for a restraining order against Ida. We thought it would be the first step in getting her out of our lives for good, but as we quickly learned, a restraining order alone was not enough to stop her. She did not respect the boundaries we set and, in fact, violated the order. A few weeks after the restraining order was put in place, Avery and I took Ben and Violet to the park to play. We thought it would be a quiet afternoon, a perfect time for the kids to play outside and get some sun. Little did we know that it would turn into another disaster with Ida. We were in the park, keeping an eye on Ben and Violet as they ran around, when suddenly there she was, Ida, walking straight towards us. I remember the shock I felt when I realized who she was. Somehow she had found out we were there. She hadn't even bothered to warn us or contact us first. She just turned up acting like she owned the place. We immediately asked the children to come and sit behind us on a bench. We knew some of the mothers there and they knew about our situation, so they offered to look after the children while we spoke to Ida. When she approached us, she immediately started saying that she just wanted to spend time with her grandchildren. We told her in no uncertain terms that we didn't feel comfortable with that, especially considering our history with her. We made it clear that she was not welcome to spend time with the children. We had set clear boundaries for a reason, and we weren't going to let her ignore them. And on top of that, we had a restraining order against her, so she was breaking the law. Ida definitely didn't handle it well. Instead of backing down like a normal person, she became confrontational. She started pushing Avery, and before we knew it, Avery was on the ground. It was a scary moment. Avery had hurt her back when Ida pushed her, and for a few moments we didn't know what to do. Fortunately, some people nearby saw what was happening and stepped in to help us get Ida away from us. It was only after that, when we were able to move away from the scene, that we realized how dangerous the situation had been. For a while after that, we were afraid to take the children to public places. We didn't know if Ida would show up again, and that made us feel incredibly anxious. We wanted the children to be able to enjoy their lives and feel safe. But after everything that had happened, we didn't know if that was possible. The last thing we wanted was for something worse to happen, especially with Ida's unpredictable behavior. It was then that we realized that a restraining order was not strong enough to stop her. She had already violated it, and we needed to take more serious measures to protect ourselves and the children. Victor, Avery's husband, is a lawyer, and he suggested that we investigate charges of endangering a minor. It seemed the logical next step. Not only had Ida physically endangered Ben when she took the children for a walk, but she had also made multiple threats against Violet and Ben. With Victor's help, we began to gather the evidence we needed to move forward. It was a bit difficult, with many legal obstacles to overcome, and it took longer than we expected. But in the end, We managed to sort everything out. We had witness statements from the mothers in the park who helped us. We had messages from Ida that showed how aggressive and terrifying she had become. We had all the documentation we needed to build a strong case. So we proceeded with the charges of child endangerment. We knew this was the best chance we had to protect our family for good. All our efforts in gathering evidence and preparing our case paid off. Ida was found guilty and received a 6-year prison sentence. For us, it was a bittersweet victory. We were glad she was being held accountable for her actions, but it was hard to fully celebrate knowing that this situation could have been avoided if she had respected our boundaries. At least we can be sure that she won't hurt anyone else for a while. Now that the case has concluded, we are starting to feel a sense of peace. It has been a long journey, but we are moving forward. I am so relieved that we can move on and focus on what really matters, our family. We can take Ben and Violet for a walk without worrying that Ida will show up and cause more chaos. I want to thank everyone who has supported us during this process. It has meant a lot to us. I'm just grateful that we can finally breathe a little easier.